Know your place. The words sliced through the air with the force of a whip, echoing in the pristine conference room. James Harrison, the billionaire CEO, stood at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared and his expression as cold as ice. His eyes, hard and unforgiving, locked onto Maya, the lone figure standing near the door. The entire room went silent. Every person in the room, business partners, executives, and high-level managers, shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should look away or brace for the fallout. But Maya, the black maid who had been tasked with delivering water to the meeting, didn't flinch. She stood tall, her back straight, her hands trembling slightly but her resolve unbroken. She had heard the condescending tone in Harrison's voice, the same tone that had treated her like nothing more than a servant for the past few weeks. Yet, in that moment, she wasn't just the help. She wasn't just a nameless face in a uniform. She was more than that. Maya was no stranger to the sting of racism, but she had learned to swallow it, to move on, to ignore the whispers and the sneers. But today, something was different. Something had shifted. Maya had been working at Harrison's luxurious corporate headquarters for weeks now, quietly and efficiently, always in the background. But in this room, at this very moment, she had overheard something dangerous. A corporate deal was about to be signed, one that could collapse Harrison's empire in a matter of days if not properly handled. She had recognized the flaw in the contract as soon as she laid eyes on it earlier that morning. She had read it over and over again, every word, every clause, carefully analyzing the legal jargon. The deal was flawed. But speaking up. She knew that if she spoke, she'd be dismissed, laughed at, maybe even fired. She was just the maid. This clause, she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach, it flips the liability, Mr. Harrison. If you sign this, your company takes the fall. There was a moment of stunned silence. Harrison's expression hardened even further, his lips curling into a tight line as he glanced at the other men in the room, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion. Then, his eyes snapped back to Maya. "Excuse me," he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're telling me about legal contracts." His voice was sharp, dismissive. "You clean toilets, girl, not negotiate multi-million-dollar deals." The men around the table shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others holding their breath. Maya didn't back down. "I read it, Mr. Harrison. It's right there in the fine print. If this merger fails, your company will be on the hook for the losses, not Vaughn Global." She paused, locking eyes with him, her heart pounding in her chest. "If you don't read the details, your company will be ruined." The silence in the room grew heavier, the weight of Maya's words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Harrison's face turned a shade redder, but he didn't speak. Instead, he looked to one of his assistants. "Escort her out," he said coldly, his voice unwavering. Maya's heart sank. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, but she stood her ground, not saying another word. She turned and walked out of the conference room with as much dignity as she could muster. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she would still have a job tomorrow, but for the first time in her life, she didn't care. She had spoken the truth. The truth that no one else had the courage to say. As she stepped into the hallway, she could hear the murmurs behind her, the sound of people whispering, but Maya didn't turn around. She had done what was right. The rest was out of her hands. The next morning, Maya arrived at work early, as she always did. The crisp autumn air stung her cheeks as she walked through the quiet parking lot, her uniform pressed and her lanyard hanging neatly around her neck. She had thought about what had happened the day before, her heart still racing at the memory of the confrontation in the boardroom. The room, so full of power and wealth, had felt like a cage. She had stood in front of the men who controlled so much, yet she had spoken the truth. And somehow, the truth felt more powerful than anything they could throw at her. As she entered the building, she was greeted by the usual faces, the janitors and maintenance staff who, like her, moved through the shadows of the building. Maya had learned to blend in, to stay invisible. But she couldn't ignore the way people looked at her now. She had been noticed. The whispers were already starting. She made her way to the service elevator, the hum of the elevator doors opening and closing echoing in the otherwise silent corridor. Her fingers tapped nervously on the railing. She had no idea what would happen now. Would she be fired? Would they pretend nothing had happened? The thought of being dismissed, of being told she no longer belonged, was a knot in her stomach. As she stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the employee floor, her mind raced. She knew she had done the right thing. But would they see it that way? The elevator doors slid open, and Maya stepped out, her heart in her throat. The usual buzz of the staff lounge was absent today. Instead, the room felt heavy, filled with a quiet tension. A few of her colleagues glanced up at her as she entered, but no one said anything. They all knew. Everyone had heard the rumors by now. Maya headed straight for the break room, trying to act like nothing was wrong, but her nerves were getting the best of her. She needed coffee. She needed something to steady her hands. As she poured herself a cup, the door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Maya, a voice said, cold but with an underlying sense of purpose. Maya turned slowly, her heart dropping. It was Veronica Ellison, the hotel's general manager. Maya had never spoken to her much, but she knew of her. Veronica was one of the most powerful women in the building, and she rarely left her office. "Yes, ma'am?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Veronica didn't smile. Instead, she stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. "I need to speak with you," she said, her tone serious. Maya's stomach twisted. She followed Veronica to a small conference room nearby, her mind racing. What had she done wrong? Was this it? Had they finally had enough of her? Veronica gestured for Maya to sit down. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing them in the small space. "I'm sure you know why I'm here," Veronica began, her voice soft but firm. Maya nodded, swallowing hard. "You've made quite an impression in the last 24 hours. Veronica continued, her eyes locked on Maya's. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble, ma'am," she said, her voice low. Veronica raised a hand to stop her. "You did more than that. You saved this company from disaster. And I think it's time you were recognized for it." Maya blinked, her mind struggling to keep up. "What do you mean?" "The merger you pointed out. You were right. We almost lost everything because of that oversight." Veronica's tone softened, just for a moment. "I've been in this business a long time, Maya. And I know when I'm wrong. You didn't just read the contract. You saved us all." Maya sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding in her chest. She had expected to be reprimanded, maybe fired. Instead, Veronica was praising her. She felt a strange sense of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of confusion. "But I'm just the cleaning staff," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not," "No," Veronica interrupted gently. "You're more than that. You have a mind for business, Maya. You've been hiding your talents in the wrong place." Maya's head spun. She had no idea what to say. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm offering you a chance, Maya. A real chance. You're too smart to be doing this kind of work. I want you to join the corporate team. We need someone like you." Veronica's words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. For a moment, Maya couldn't breathe. This was more than she had ever hoped for. She had never considered a future like this, never imagined that someone would see her potential. But here it was, right in front of her. "Are you serious?" Maya asked, almost afraid to believe it. I'm very serious, Veronica replied, her eyes steady. If you're willing to take the opportunity, the job is yours. You just have to take it. Maya sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was the chance she had been waiting for her whole life. It was everything she had worked for. But it was also terrifying. To step into a world where she didn't belong, where she wasn't supposed to be. Could she really do this? Could she leave behind everything she knew and step into the unknown? She looked up at Veronica, who was watching her closely, waiting for her answer. Maya swallowed hard, then nodded. I'll do it, she said, her voice filled with determination. For the first time, Maya felt a spark of hope in her chest. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it was her turn to rise. Maya sat in her small, cluttered office, her hands folded neatly on the desk in front of her. It had been 3 weeks since she had accepted Veronica's offer, and every day felt like a new challenge. She was still adjusting to the corporate world, still trying to fit in, still learning the ropes. But she was determined to make it work. The world she had entered was unfamiliar, filled with suits, deals, and deadlines. It was nothing like the quiet, routine life she had known as a maid, where everything had a set pattern and a defined place. Now, she was surrounded by sharp minds, ambitious executives, and a constant buzz of activity. It was overwhelming at times, but Maya had never backed down from a challenge. She had worked hard to get here, and she wasn't about to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. As she sat at her desk, a stack of paperwork before her, she felt a tap on her door. She looked up to see Veronica standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. How's it going, Maya? Veronica asked, her tone neutral but kind. Maya stood up quickly, smoothing out her blouse. It's going well, ma'am, she replied, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. I've been catching up on the reports and making sure I understand the financials. I think I'm getting the hang of things. Veronica nodded, stepping into the office. Good. I've been keeping an eye on you, and I have to say, you're impressing everyone. Maya's heart fluttered. She had heard whispers in the halls, heard people talk about her behind closed doors. Some of it was praise, some of it was skepticism, but it felt good to hear it from Veronica herself. Thank you, Maya said, her voice soft but steady. I just want to prove I belong here. Veronica smiled, her eyes thoughtful. You do belong here, Maya. And I think it's time we talk about your next steps. Maya's stomach tightened. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. Next steps, she echoed, trying to keep her voice calm. Yes, Veronica said, her tone serious. I've been thinking. You've been here long enough to show what you're capable of, and I want to offer you a bigger role. There's an opening in the legal department, and I believe you're the right fit for it. Maya blinked, her mind racing. The legal department? It was a huge step up from where she had started, from what she had imagined when she first took the job. She had always been interested in law, always been fascinated by contracts and negotiations. But to be offered a role in that department? It was almost too much to process. I don't know what to say, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is. I never thought, you're ready, Maya, Veronica interrupted gently. I've seen the way you think, the way you approach problems. You have the intelligence and the drive to succeed here. All you need is the opportunity. Maya sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. She had never imagined her life would lead her to this point, but now that she was here, she could see it. She could see the possibilities, the doors opening before her. I'll do it, Maya said finally, her voice filled with determination. I'll take the job. Veronica's smile widened, and she reached out to shake Maya's hand. I knew you would. You've earned this, Maya. Don't forget that. As Veronica left the office, Maya sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision settling in. She had made it. She had proven herself, not just to Veronica, but to herself. The world that had once seemed so distant, so out of reach, was now hers to navigate. And she would navigate it with all the strength and determination she had. The future was hers to shape. Maya had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. She had taken her place in this world. And she wasn't going to let anything stop her. Maya sat at her new desk in the legal department, the weight of the stack of documents in front of her pressing down on her, but not as heavily as the weight of the opportunity she had been given. She had only been in the role for a few days, but already she was drowning in a sea of contracts, clauses, and legal jargon. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything. The legal world was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. The contracts were filled with words that felt foreign to her, the legalese that had seemed so simple when she had read it as a maid now felt like a maze she couldn't navigate. But she had been here before. She had been the one no one thought could succeed, the one who had been dismissed as just a servant. And yet, she had made it this far. Maya knew that if she could get through this, if she could master this new world, she would prove to everyone, and most importantly, to herself, that she belonged here. As the hours passed, Maya found herself lost in the work. She couldn't let her doubts take hold. There was too much at stake now. She had to prove herself, not just to Veronica, but to everyone who had ever looked down on her. She was more than just a maid. She was capable. She was smart. She had earned this chance. But just as she was beginning to feel a sense of accomplishment, the door to her office opened, and a man stepped inside. It was John, one of the senior legal associates. Maya had seen him around the office before, always surrounded by other people, his sharp suit a stark contrast to her modest blouse. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident smile, but Maya wasn't fooled. She had learned quickly that the men in this world didn't often take kindly to women, especially women like her. "Maya, right?" he asked, his voice casual, but there was something about it that made her uneasy. "Yes, that's me," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm working on the merger contract." John nodded, glancing at the papers on her desk. "You're doing well, but I think you might need some help with those. Legal language can be tricky for someone without formal training." Maya felt a slight sting at his words. She had expected this. She had expected people to underestimate her, to assume she didn't belong. "I'll manage," she said, forcing a smile. "I've been getting the hang of it." John raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything more. Instead, he stepped closer, his hands resting on the back of her chair. "If you're sure," he said, his tone soft, almost too soft. "But you know, it's not always easy to prove yourself here, especially when you come from a different background." Maya's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she felt the old familiar sting of being judged. But she wouldn't let him see it. She wouldn't let him win. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice firm. "Thank you for the advice, but I've got it covered." John smiled, but there was something cold about it. "All right, Maya. Just don't bite off more than you can chew." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving Maya alone once again. She exhaled slowly, her hands gripping the edges of the desk. She had expected this kind of treatment. It was part of the game, part of the world she had entered. But it didn't make it any easier. Maya had worked hard to get here, and she wasn't going to let anyone make her feel like she didn't belong. She turned her attention back to the contract in front of her, the words beginning to make more sense as she read through them again. She wasn't just here to do the work. She was here to change things, to prove that someone like her could succeed in a world that had never given her a chance. The clock on the wall ticked louder, reminding her that time was running out. She had to keep going. She had to prove them all wrong. She took a deep breath, her fingers dancing across the papers as she continued her work. This was just the beginning. Maya felt the weight of the decision hanging over her as she sat at her desk, staring at the legal documents spread out before her. She had spent the last few weeks in this new role, fighting to prove herself, to show everyone that she belonged. The room around her was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead filling the space as she reviewed the contract once more. It was late, well past the normal working hours, but she hadn't noticed the time. There was always more work to do, always more to learn. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. She picked it up and saw a message from Veronica. "Maya, can you come to my office? There's something we need to discuss." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had thought everything was going well, but now, with the message in front of her, she felt a new wave of anxiety. What could Veronica want to talk about? She stood up and grabbed her jacket, walking down the hall toward Veronica's office. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the office earlier in the day. When she reached the door, she knocked softly before stepping inside. Veronica was seated at her desk, looking over some documents. She looked up when Maya entered and smiled warmly. "Come in, Maya. Have a seat." Maya sat down, trying to steady her breathing. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice betraying the nerve she was trying to hide. Veronica leaned back in her chair, studying her for a moment before speaking. "I've been impressed with your work these past few weeks. You've picked up things quickly, and your attention to detail is exactly what we need here." Maya felt a flush of pride. She had worked so hard to get to this point. To hear Veronica acknowledge her efforts made everything feel worth it. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice steady. Veronica continued, "But there's something I want to talk to you about. We're moving forward with the merger, and I'm going to need someone to help with the final negotiations. I want you to take the lead on this, Maya." Maya's heart raced. Lead the negotiations? It felt like a huge leap, but she had been given opportunities before, and she wasn't about to back down now. "You want me to handle the negotiations?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Veronica said. "I've seen your potential. You've been doing well in the legal department, and I think you're ready for this. It's a big responsibility, but I believe in you." Maya swallowed, the weight of the responsibility settling in. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in on her. She had worked for this moment, had worked so hard to prove herself, but now that it was here, she couldn't help but wonder if she was really ready. "I don't know if I can do this," Maya said quietly, her doubts creeping in. Veronica smiled reassuringly. "I wouldn't have offered it to you if I didn't think you were capable. You've already shown that you have the skills. Now, it's about taking that next step." Maya nodded slowly, still uncertain, but feeling a spark of confidence ignite within her. This was her moment. "Okay," she said, her voice firmer now. "I'll do it." Veronica's smile widened. "Good. I knew you would. We start tomorrow." Maya left the office, her mind racing. She had just been handed the chance of a lifetime. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. She had come this far, and now it was time to show the world what she was capable of. The night air was cool as she stepped outside, her thoughts swirling with the possibilities. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain, she wasn't going to stop now. She had worked too hard to get here, and she was ready to take on whatever challenge lay ahead. Maya walked into the conference room, her heart beating fast in her chest. Today was the day. The day she would lead the final negotiations for the merger, the moment she had been working toward for weeks. She had spent countless hours studying every detail of the contract, reviewing every clause, every word. Her mind was sharp, but the weight of the responsibility still pressed on her shoulders. As she stepped into the room, she was greeted by the cold, professional faces of the board members and executives. They were already seated around the large, polished table, their expressions unreadable. Maya's eyes flicked to Veronica, who was sitting at the head of the table, a slight nod signaling Maya to take her place. As Maya sat down, she felt a quiet surge of confidence. This was her moment. She wasn't the maid anymore. She wasn't the girl who had been underestimated and dismissed. She was the one in charge now. She had earned this. The meeting began, and Maya took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. She was no longer intimidated by the men and women sitting around the table. She had spent the last few weeks working alongside them, learning their tactics, and understanding the power plays that often took place behind closed doors. She was prepared. As the discussions continued, Maya steered the conversation, pointing out the discrepancies in the contract, offering solutions, and addressing concerns. The room was silent as the others listened, their attention fully on her. She felt a sense of pride well up inside her. They were listening. They were paying attention. And for the first time in her life, she realized they weren't just listening because they had to, they were listening because she had earned their respect. Time seemed to slow as Maya expertly navigated the intricacies of the deal. The tension in the room was palpable, but Maya kept her focus. She could feel the eyes of the board members on her, but it didn't faze her. She had come too far to let self-doubt creep in now. She was in control. Hours passed as the negotiations unfolded. Maya made her final point, and the room fell into a heavy silence. The deal had been finalized. The company would walk away with the best possible terms, all thanks to her quick thinking and strategic planning. She had done it. As the meeting concluded, the board members filed out of the room, congratulating her on her performance. Veronica approached her with a smile. "You did it, Maya. You're exactly the kind of leader this company needs." Maya smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had done what she set out to do. She had proven herself, not just to them, but to herself. As she left the room, Maya couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. A few months ago, she had been the maid, invisible to everyone around her. Now, she was a key player in one of the most important business deals the company had ever seen. She had broken free from the role they had assigned her. She had made her own path. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The future was wide open, and Maya was ready for whatever came next. Maya sat in her new office, the faint hum of the air conditioning the only sound in the quiet room. She had been here for a few months now, working her way up the corporate ladder, proving to everyone that she belonged. The desk in front of her was neat, organized, with stacks of contracts and reports she had been reviewing. It had been a whirlwind of a few months, endless meetings, late nights, and moments of doubt, but it had all led to this. She was no longer just a maid who had stepped into a world of wealth and power. She was now a key figure in the company's success, a vital part of its future. And she had earned it. As Maya looked out the window, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. A year ago, she had been cleaning the very office she now worked in. Back then, she had felt invisible, like a ghost in a world that didn't notice her, didn't care about her. But now, she was in the driver's seat. The world had shifted, and she had made sure she was the one steering it. Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Veronica. "Meeting in 30 minutes. Be ready." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Another big meeting. The pressure was always there, but she had learned to embrace it, to thrive under it. She quickly reviewed her notes and made sure everything was in order. When the time came, she walked into the conference room, her posture straight, her eyes focused. The room was filled with familiar faces, executives, lawyers, and partners. They all turned to look at her as she entered, and for the first time, she didn't feel out of place. She belonged here. Veronica was already at the head of the table, as usual. She smiled at Maya as she entered, a look of approval in her eyes. "Maya, we're discussing the future of the company today," Veronica began, her voice commanding attention. And you've earned the right to be at the forefront of these discussions. Maya nodded, feeling a rush of pride. She had worked so hard for this moment. It had not been easy, but she had never backed down. We've seen how well you've handled the recent merger and the legal negotiations, Veronica continued. Now, I want you to take on a new challenge. We're looking to expand our international operations, and I believe you're the perfect person to lead this initiative. Maya felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was it, the next big step. She had always dreamed of taking on global challenges, of seeing her work impact the world in ways that mattered. But leading an international expansion? It was a huge responsibility. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the other executives. They were all waiting for her response, all silently expecting her to step up. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but instead of shrinking, she straightened her back. This was her moment. I'm ready, Maya said, her voice steady, filled with determination. I'll lead the expansion. I'll make sure we get it right. The room was silent for a moment, then a few heads nodded, and Veronica gave her a smile. Good, she said. I knew you were the one for this. Let's make it happen. As the meeting continued, Maya felt a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just a player in the game anymore, she was shaping the game. The company's future, its growth, was now in her hands. The world that had once felt so distant, so out of reach, was now her domain. And she wasn't going to let anyone or anything stop her. She had come too far. She had fought too hard. And now, she was going to take it all. The future was wide open, and Maya was ready to lead it. Maya stood at the top of the glass building, looking out over the city. The skyline stretched out before her, a sea of lights and towering structures. It had been a year since she first walked into this world, a world that had once seemed so far out of reach. Now, she was at the helm of one of the company's most important initiatives, expanding its operations internationally. She had come a long way from the janitor's closet, from being the invisible worker who cleaned up after others. Today, she was a leader, a woman whose decisions had the power to shape the future of the company. As she took in the view, a sense of pride filled her chest. But with that pride came a sense of responsibility that was heavier than she had ever imagined. The international expansion was a massive undertaking. It involved countless meetings, negotiations, and cultural considerations. Maya had learned quickly that the corporate world was not just about numbers and deals, it was about people. Understanding their needs, their expectations, and their fears. And Maya had the unique ability to do that. She understood what it was like to feel overlooked, to be dismissed because of where you came from. That empathy had become her greatest asset in this role. As she looked at the city below, her thoughts drifted to the early days of her new role. The doubt, the hesitation, the constant pressure to prove herself. She remembered the first big meeting she had led, how nervous she had been, how she had questioned whether she was ready. But now, those fears seemed so distant. She had earned her place here. She had fought for it. And now, there was no turning back. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Veronica. We need to talk. My office, now. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Veronica had been her mentor, her guiding light in this corporate world. But now, as the weight of her new role pressed down on her, she couldn't help but wonder if she had done enough. What did Veronica want to discuss? She quickly made her way to Veronica's office, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. When she arrived, she knocked softly on the door before entering. Veronica was sitting at her desk, a serious expression on her face. Maya, come in. Have a seat, she said, her tone neutral but kind. Maya sat down, trying to read Veronica's expression. What's going on? Maya asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. Veronica leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. We've been reviewing the progress of the expansion, and I have to say, you've done a great job so far. You've shown an incredible amount of initiative, and your approach has been exactly what we needed. Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had worked so hard for this, and to hear Veronica's praise meant everything to her. Thank you, Maya said quietly. But we've hit a few roadblocks, Veronica continued, her tone shifting slightly. There are some issues with the overseas partnerships we've been pursuing. They're not as solid as we thought. I need you to lead the charge on fixing this. We need someone who understands the local culture, who can smooth over the negotiations and make sure everything stays on track. Maya's heart raced. This was the next big challenge. She had already proven herself, but this felt different. It was a new level of responsibility. It would test everything she had learned and more. I'll take care of it, Maya said, her voice firm with determination. Veronica smiled, her eyes filled with confidence. I know you will. I'm counting on you. As Maya left the office, she felt the weight of the task ahead of her. It was daunting, but it also felt right. She had come this far, and now it was time to prove that she could take the company to the next level. The road ahead was uncertain, but Maya knew one thing for sure, she was ready. Ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Ready to lead. Ready to change the world. Maya sat at her desk, the dim light of the late afternoon filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the office. The city outside was quiet now, the sounds of the busy streets muted by the glass and steel that separated her from the world below. Her fingers rested lightly on the papers in front of her, her gaze lost in the stillness of the room. The weight of the day, of the months that had led to this moment, seemed to press against her chest, but she didn't move. She had made it. She had done what no one had expected her to do. The chair creaked softly as she shifted, but the room remained silent, a quiet that felt both peaceful and final. Her phone buzzed softly on the desk, but she didn't reach for it. There was no need to check the messages anymore. Everything had been set in motion. The deals had been made. The company was moving forward, and so was she. But in this moment, there was only the stillness. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet fill her mind. She had fought so hard for this, fought to be seen, to be heard, to prove that she belonged. And now, as the sunlight faded outside, Maya felt something shift within her. It wasn't victory. It wasn't triumph. It was something deeper, something that felt like peace. The world hadn't changed, not entirely. But she had. And that was enough. The door opened softly, the sound barely noticeable, but Maya didn't look up. She didn't need to. Veronica stepped into the room, her presence familiar but distant now. There was no need for words, not after everything that had been said. The silence between them spoke volumes. Veronica stood there for a moment, watching Maya. She didn't say anything, but her eyes, those eyes that had once seen her as a maid, now saw her as a peer, said more than any words ever could. Finally, Veronica nodded and turned, the soft click of her heels the only sound as she left. Maya didn't watch her go. She didn't need to. The door closed quietly behind Veronica, and the room was once again filled with only the sound of Maya's breathing, steady and calm. The last light of the day began to fade, the shadows stretching across the room, and Maya let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing. The world outside was still there, bustling and alive, but inside this room, inside her mind, there was only the silence, the peace that came with knowing she had done what she set out to do. She had changed. And nothing else mattered.